Now we'll continue with our theme of real estate evolution. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Issi Romem. He's an economist and the founder of MetroSite, which does data-driven research on matters involving urban, labor, housing, and real estate economics. Issi is a fellow at the Turner Center for Housing Innovation at UC Berkeley and has served as chief economist of Trulia and senior director of housing and urban economics at Zillow. We are delighted to have him back to the forum. He's been with us before. He's going to lead a discussion about how housing will evolve in response to the pandemic. And so, Issi, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your panel.
Thank you, Steve. So first of all, thank you for having me. As Steve mentioned, we're gonna discuss how COVID and the pandemic are likely to affect housing and workplaces and our cities in general. We've got a bit of a hodgepodge of discussion topics here, but we'll try and run through them efficiently. Let me introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Faraji Wayland Robinson. Faraji is a broker and developer in Washington, D.C., where he focuses on using real estate and technology platforms to widen access to real estate capital and ownership. He holds a master's in real estate development from the Center for Real Estate at MIT and is a Halcyon Fellow and a Capital Impact Partners Fellow. We'll also have Jonathan Lawless on the panel. Jonathan works at Fannie Mae, which is, as everybody probably knows, the largest guarantor and provider of liquidity in the American mortgage market. He's responsible for product development and addresses issues of housing affordability, especially for underserved populations. We also have, last but not least, Patrick Kennedy, who owns Panoramic Interests, which is a development firm that's been building housing, live workspace, and commercial property, mostly in the Bay Area since 1990. Panoramic Interests has focused on dense, mixed-use, mixed-income infill developments, typically financed with private funds. All of the multifamily housing projects that they build include below-market rate units. So welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining me on the panel.
Thank you.
I'll start off by saying that the pandemic has put city centers under siege. To put it nicely, there's a fear of density among some of us. To put it more bluntly, people don't want to be anywhere near other people. And at least judging by the type of coverage that has become more common in the newspapers in the last few months, you might wonder whether city centers and big cities in general are going to survive, whether there's going to be some tremendous exodus out of them, or at least to the suburbs, if not from the metro in its entirety. So my question to you, panelists, is whether the balance between the city centers and the suburbs is shifting in some way that's really fundamental.
I guess I'll jump in first. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Thanks for the great question. Thanks to MIT for allowing us to be here today, especially at 9:00 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time. It's prime time, so I'm hoping a lot of Netflix series are all done, and so people are tuning into the panel. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. And just one side note I'll make is that all these opinions are my own, so I'm going to say and speculate a lot of things. If you want to know what Fannie Mae really thinks, you can read our 900-page financials or whatnot. But in any case, the thoughts are my own. So I'll share the very minimal amount of data. So as opposed to sort of saying, I don't know, which I think is really truly the answer, I'll share just a little bit of the data that we have and what we're seeing in applications. So we've been tracking at a few MSAs really closely where mortgage applications have been coming in for the last few months, and then benchmarking that against the same months for 2018 and 2019, right? And what we are seeing is that where applicants are from is much more likely to be from denser areas, and where applicants are going to is much more likely to be in less dense areas than we've seen in the past 2 years. So again, extremely preliminary data, and that's based on just a few metro areas. I'm not even going to quote numbers or cities at this point because it's so early on. But we are seeing a little bit of that data. But I will say there are fundamental long-term trends that are hard to take apart here, right? There's just been a long ongoing trend as demographics, as the millennial generation ages, they're going to continue to get married and have kids and want to have a home. And so, we still see in all the survey data, people want to own homes, they want space, they want to be in good schools. And so there was already this trend away from denser areas as sort of just demographically we move in that direction. Not to mention the fact that I don't think I'd heard the name Boise since I did sort of high school geography, and now suddenly it's like the coolest city in the country. And so that happened pre-COVID. These trends are sort of ongoing, and so we're seeing a continuation of that. And I do think COVID is starting to contribute something to that. I think the last thing I'll say, and just in terms of the work that I do in general, is housing affordability in cities has been really awful. There's just not enough supply where cities are. And so there's been so much demand and so little new supply that people have had to look to elsewhere for housing. And insofar as housing in cities continues to be really expensive, and we have generations that want to start families, and now potentially generations that are going to be negatively impacted economically from COVID, they're just going to be looking for more affordable places to live. So I think there are some broad trends, there's some economic trends, and then very, very preliminary data showing that people are looking to move out of more crowded areas.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Izzy, could I chime in here a bit? This may be a bit self-serving since I have a very large project that's coming online in about 6 weeks in downtown San Francisco in the Soma area. But with regard to the death of the cities, I do think it's a bit premature, and I think it's exaggerated. I think the large number of departures that we have witnessed here in San Francisco, which are real and which have resulted in much lower rents, largely consist of people that have gone home to their parents, who probably are in the suburbs. And that has resulted in a conspicuous reduction in the number of people in the public areas, except for the bars and outdoor restaurants in San Francisco, which are as packed as ever. And I think that, yes, the cities will be on pause until we actually address COVID and the usual attractions that make cities desirable reopen. But I don't think we'll be able to really know how big the impact is on the cities unless and until we see what happens when they do reopen. And in the Bay Area here, of course, I'm in San Francisco, outdoor restaurants have reopened to very large crowds. Indoor restaurants, I'm not sure when they're going to reopen, but we'll get a glimpse of that then. And I actually think that the central business districts of the cities may see a resurgence of population and residential housing because people will want to walk to their jobs. And I'm skeptical about people wanting to work at home. I know that certain people, maybe middle-aged people with established careers, want to work at home where it's easy and where they have home offices where they can get away from their kids and their roommates. But I'm not so certain that the young and the restless, as I call them, are eager to work in their cramped apartments and outside their offices that have 24/7 catering and massages and everything else that we often see in modern workplaces. So it could happen, but I'm skeptical that we're going to see a massive shift yet.
When we spoke before our panel in preparation, I think it was you who made a comment about the formative years of one's career.
Right.
Do you want to share that maybe?
Sure. Yeah, I think serendipity plays a huge role in not only the development of people's careers, but the development of ideas. And I think I just read an article in Barron's or something yesterday about how Mark Zuckerberg happened to be in a rented house in Palo Alto, and he went out for a walk and he bumped into Sean Parker that was a block away. And Sean Parker introduced him to Peter Thiel, who invested $500,000 into Facebook, and we know where that happened. That kind of story is more common than you think in the provenance of a lot of businesses in the Bay Area. And I just think that many young people recognize that, and they also recognize that they're not going to bump into Sean Parker on a Zoom call in their bedroom in their apartment. And plus, it's just more fun being in a city if you're young. So maybe we'll see a migration of older established individuals to suburbs who are looking for more pastoral climes. But I'm skeptical that people, the younger people, will choose that, or at least large numbers of them will.
So I agree, and I think serendipity is terrifically important. And I think even if one is able to secure a job that you can do from the North Pole, I think it's that transition between jobs where serendipity suddenly becomes very important. You need that cup of coffee with a friend who randomly tells you about some opportunity that you go after and pursue. I think that the job search is going to be that much harder for people who are remote. I want to add to that. I also sense that the fear of density is a temporary factor in the long run. It might last for the duration of the pandemic plus 2, 3, 4, 5 years beyond that, but it won't stay with us for decades. What I am concerned about, and I'm going to ask you about this, Faraji, next, is whether working from home is fundamentally changing things. At the moment, we're probably at an extreme in terms of the number of people and the share of the time that they work from home. But I think that when the pandemic is over, we're not going to revert entirely to where we were half a year ago. Rather, some firms will have accepted that working from home partially or fully actually works in a way that they would never have tried out before. And they might stay in that middle ground. Some firms might stay at the extreme of working from home. And there will be some permanent shift in the direction of more work from home. And I find it hard to believe that won't raise some people's tolerance for longer commutes, and in the end support demand for suburban living at the expense of city center living. But I think that revolves directly on what happens to the future of the workplace. And that brings me to you, Faraji. What can you tell us about that?
So I'm actually working on a concept which really focuses on the hub and spoke model. And going back to the last question about where people are moving. So I saw some urban turf data today that said, I live in Washington, D.C., and the year-over-year price changes in Alexandria and Arlington were just amazing. I think 25% for Alexandria, which is a true suburb, and then Arlington again, which is kind of a closer in, denser suburb. But I don't know how much that's, kind of the Amazon effect, or how much that really says that people are moving and really making decisions relative to more suburban living. DC was totally flat. So, but as it relates to, I think, how people started working. So I was working remotely first in 2006. I had an IBM ThinkPad and I had maybe a Palm phone or a BlackBerry, and you could do it then. But I think the big difference now is it's become acceptable to not have FaceTime with your boss, because nobody's having FaceTime with your boss right now. So I don't think it's a function of technology or the ability. It's really a psychological, kind of willingness on the part of organizations to accept that. And I think the longer that this pandemic goes on, the more comfortable people get with it, the stickier that's going to become.
Jonathan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you hit on a couple of the things on virtual working. I mean, first of all, it's really hard to deny the fundamental fact that a lot of companies are seeing a big spike in productivity. And so, at the end of the day, the bottom line is going to be pretty important as people see virtual as a more effective way to get work done, and not just an equally okay way to get work done, but a more effective way. I think that's gonna change a lot of people's thinking, companies' thinkings on that. I mean, you mentioned commutes, and I think when you take a step back and look at what we do in terms of commuting as a civilization, right? I mean, the average commute time each direction right now is 30 minutes for Americans. That's an hour a day. If you sort of do the math, we have 100 million people spending an hour a day commuting. That equates to 11,000 years of man hours being wasted a day in commuting. And I'll tell you honestly, I certainly don't miss my 30-minute each way commute. And I really do like the fact that, being on a panel virtually means I don't have to fly to Boston, albeit in the one nice month of weather they get per year. But also, I get to put my kids to bed and tell them, don't come downstairs unless you want to be on YouTube. And I get to, like, you probably see in the background, my bar's right there. And so as soon as I'm done with this, I can walk over to my bar and not pay $20 for a cocktail at a hotel. So, the benefits of virtual are from productivity, from people's health and well-being, from the bottom line expense to companies. I just, it's going to be hard for me to believe that those facts, now so firmly proven through this, won't influence a lot of decision making going forward. It likely will be gradual, and not to make it sound like overnight that's going to change, but you're hearing a lot of discussion about it. And just one thing that we talked about in our pre-discussion too is just there's sort of if there's let's say a cure for COVID that comes out next month, right? This is all a different story. If there is, if the vaccine doesn't come till the end of next year, and the next entire school year for college kids is spent virtually, we're talking about very different sort of long-term outcomes and how people get used to and view some of these different ways of working. So I do want to sort of put that out there, that I don't think it's been long enough, but pretty soon the amount of investments that companies have made to make remote working very effective, I think those in a lot of cases are going to become permanent.
That makes sense. Do any of you think that this will manifest itself in changes to the way we build workspaces? Are we going to see some new middle ground between traditional offices and WeWork that serves a new generation of work from homers?
Yes. So I think, for one, we're going to see different types of offices, and I think they're going to be located in different places. In a city like DC or San Francisco, you just have so much space, period. So you're starting to see new nodes anyway. So you're starting to see Tyson's and Bethesda and Fairfax become places where there actually is real office density. But I think as people work from home more, they're going to want to work much closer to the rest of their lives, where their children's schools are, kind of where their restaurants are, and have kind of a much more nodal kind of approach, where instead of driving 30 minutes here and then 20 minutes here, you kind of walk 5 minutes here and then maybe bike 4 minutes there. And so I think that's a much smaller office that you're in 2-3 days a week maybe, or some staggered shift. But 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a bifurcation, Issy, between, say, people under 40 that don't have families and people over 35 that do. Because what Faraji just described is perfect for young families that have considerable interests and obligations outside of work, and the younger people that go to cities for all the reasons young people have always gone to cities: friendship, love, romance, excitement, stimuli. And I don't see that being easily duplicated in the suburbs. So we may see cities getting a lot younger, actually.
Do you, Patrick, see a different future for the CBD in terms of the mix of work versus residence?
I think you could see more residents in the CBD, as long as it's not the usual wasteland at night that most CBDs are, because they don't have any actual retail on the ground floor that's very interesting. But I do think the reticence to take mass transit is real, and it's going to take a while to go away. But if people can walk or ride their bikes, in San Francisco, for example, we're seeing a massive resurgence of interest in bicycles, especially electric bikes, given our hills. And lots and lots of more people are on our bike paths now. And I think we'll see people locate, depending on whether they can get to their job or their interests easily, on a bike or walking.
Do you see any mirror image shifts in the suburbs? Will suburbs change in the way they allow us to think about community? Will they work differently, less like bedrooms and more like let's call it full service neighborhoods?
Yeah. I have not been out to a suburb in about 14 years, so I'm a bad person to ask about that. But I think it will have. I think the people that live there will demand it. Now the question is whether the suburbs will allow density and mixed use and things like that, which in the Bay Area is a very, very steep climb to get suburbs to zone more like cities.
You and I have to avoid talking about that like fire, because you spend all the rest of our time on that if we get into that. There's a question here that came from the audience to you, Patrick, and it asks whether you're seeing change in the demand for micro units, and specifically whether you would consider at this point changing the amount of micro outdoor space that comes with projects. Has that come up?
Well, I mean, we have a 200 unit project that's coming online September 1st. And so I'll be much better, in much better position to tell you about that then. But there's no question that people prize more outdoor space now. And we certainly will. We always put in roof decks and balconies and so forth. Whether we make a material shift and add more of that remains to be seen, but it's certainly forefront in our thinking. One thing we have been doing that has actually been quite beneficial, sort of by happenstance, is we put in very sophisticated air quality HVAC systems with MERV 13 filters, which by a happy coincidence is the minimum quality filter that will filter coronavirus. I found out after the fact. And so I think having high quality air is proving to be a boon in our new projects. We've never done that before, but we have now.
I hope every developer out there learns quickly which filters work with coronavirus and which don't. So this all leads me to the next category, which we're getting some questions about as well, which is, what's going to happen to homes? I think it's probably not going to surprise anyone to say that we might find home offices built and required more often. We might even see his or hers. But to what extent is that a meaningful change in how we build homes? And what other changes might we expect?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on a couple of things. I mean, first and foremost, all of this is contingent on will more people work from home on a regular basis. And if we do see that as a trend, I think it's going to exacerbate something we've already seen, which is, the last 40 years have been homes that have been built have been growing in space, and homes that in household size has been decreasing. But touching on something Patrick said, though, I mean, what's really interesting is that the suburbs are really built for an entirely different, I mean, you really think an entirely different culture in a sense, right? If you go back to the 60s and 70s and think about what households look like, right? I mean, I think the typical nuclear family as a percentage of households is now half of what it was in the 70s. 28% of households now are single. And of course, the birth rate now is half of what it was, say, in the 60s and 70s. I think I read somewhere that there are more households that have dogs than have kids now, right? And so, which is shocking, right? And so, if you think about the type of housing that exists in the suburbs, yes, there's going to be a desire for the sort of traditional nuclear family, which still does exist in large numbers, to buy bigger and better houses that have space for an office, but I think what'll be curious is what do you do if you're single? And Patrick, I can assure you, you can find love in the suburbs. But again, how do you do that if you're living on a cul-de-sac, right? Is there an opportunity to sort of change the way that single family housing looks? Because I mean, it is predominantly built for the 2-parent, 2.5 kids sort of type of household, and so I do think housing style will have to change. And the one last demographic trend I'll mention too, which will be really interesting to watch over time in terms of what housing needs to accommodate, is nursing homes have probably really fallen out of favor of those who are retiring and aging. And so we're going to see a lot more aging in place. And frankly, it's a trend we've been watching for years, because the typical tenure in a single family house went from something like 3 years to 10 years, and I think it's at 12 years now. And so we're just going to see a lot more baby boomers hanging on to their houses in the suburbs, which, to Patrick and to your comment, I see is going to put, nobody's going to want to zone in bars, for example. And so the neighborhood I'm right next to in DC is like, they will fight anything that's remotely like fun because they want a silent, quiet neighborhood and a 10-minute drive to the grocery store. So in any case, it's sort of a long-winded answer, but I do think, the type of community we are is going to have to adjust to the demographics of who we will be. And I think it's far from being able to suit the needs of what's coming.
Were you going to say something, Faraji?
Yeah, so going back to kind of the house sizes. So, where I live in DC, we're very compact. There's not, kind of a great deal that I think developers are really going to do as it relates to unit sizes, because a bedroom is still, kind of the highest and best use, is packing as many people as you can in a small city. But going out to, kind of the suburbs, I think you're already seeing a lot of these multi-generational houses. And I think you're seeing smart developers already thinking about, kind of, can we put an in-law suite, or, kind of, even I've seen tiny houses being kind of advertised as, kind of a separate add-on. So, kind of what maybe was a tiny house for grandma, maybe now becomes an office in the short term as, kind of a marketing plan as an offering. Kind of how jurisdictions and municipalities actually change, kind of their zoning, their FAR limits, et cetera, to be seen.
So that's interesting, because I think if we look at the long run trend, households have gotten smaller, and now with the comment made about nursing homes and perhaps seniors preferring to remain in, let's call it, private housing rather than senior living, we might see an uptick in multi-generational living. And I would add to that, there's a good chance that we're looking at either a deep recession or possibly more than that in the future, where we've got, potentially dark times ahead. And if that is the case, we might see another collapse in the number of households where people either rejoin their parents or join forces to pay the rent together. And both those things might actually undo the trend we've seen over decades of households getting smaller. And it's not hard to imagine how that might change the way homes are built and designed. When we were talking earlier, Faraji, you mentioned some other more immediate changes to the way homes are built now during the pandemic. Do you want to mention any of those?
In terms of kind of projects that we're looking at, we are again looking at, kind of outdoor space is now a really premium amenity. Not just for people to kind of individually go outside, just outside of my unit onto my balcony. But if you think about a potential for, kind of recurring shutdowns and going to phase 2s and then phase 3s and then back to phase 2s, I think people will probably do more of these kind of pods where you don't quarantine completely by yourself. You have either your neighbors or you have certain family, and you're going to want to spend some time with them. So I think that may have some effect. And then, as it relates to the actual, again, kind of construction methodology of different, kind of houses versus condos. I was in Houston, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I stayed over at the Bumble Street tiny houses, which on one lot, there's maybe 10, separate single family houses. And I think that may be something that, kind of really starts to kind of mix the two, where you still have density, you have 10 separate kind of households, but you're in your own space and you have a house versus an apartment, you have outdoor space, you can park there. So I think that may be something that, kind of works in the future.
That brings me back to modest densification, to densifying the suburbs, which is something I'd love to see happen. One more thing that was mentioned in our earlier conversation was energy usage and how that might change. I think you brought that up, Jonathan.
Yeah, Fannie Mae has a product called Homestyle Renovation, and it includes the ability to sort of, either finance as part of your purchase or in your refinance energy upgrades. And so we're just seeing a lot more demand for that just in general leading up to now. Now that people are living at home, I think, the shoulder season for energy consumption is over. In other words, we've seen a huge increase in residential energy usage, but energy costs have been lower in the spring. But now when we start to see the June, July bills start to come through, people are going to see some pretty shockingly high energy bills as a result of being at home all day. And so I think energy upgrades are going to be a very, very popular thing going forward. Solar, other ways to defray costs. Again, all contingent on if people are going to be working from home more frequently. One other comment just sort of related to energy upgrades. I think the renovation business is something like a $400 billion business now. It continues to grow. People think it's going to flatten out. It continues to grow. And so, things like adding ADUs, to Faraji's point, adding space to the home. I think we had a question, which I think is a great one, which is, are people going to be looking for health upgrades to their home? Like if you are going to have a multi-generational household, you want more air filters or other ways, like if somebody needs to quarantine. So yeah, I think a lot of renovation coming through, and I think energy efficiency is going to become a very necessary one very soon.
Patrick, were you going to add something?
I have noted in San Francisco, people are buying lots more plants. So anything to kind of remind them of their former days, I think outdoors seems to be popular. But I operate in a very rarefied world, which is high density stuff in the city. So I can't speak with much authority on what's happening in the suburbs. But I do think I agree with Jonathan and Faraji, and that is, I think we are going to see sort of the lot by lot densification of the suburbs, because most cities are loosening up a bit, allowing ADUs, at least in California, where they're as of right. And I think that's also true of places in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and elsewhere. And I think people will feel more comfortable who are already in the suburbs to densify their own lot than they will to densify the downtown core, which is the area that I would like to work in if I were in the suburbs.
So that's actually a great segue into affordability and equity challenges. One of the questions that's coming here from the audience is whether the COVID crisis actually presents an opportunity for us to solve affordability and equity challenges that persist in the US. And my 2 cents when I hear that is, we've got this external event that's now helping shift demand towards the suburbs after 25 years when everyone, quote unquote, has wanted to live downtown. And where we have suddenly this new potential for building new housing through densification in this modest lot by lot way that Patrick was mentioning. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how the current shifts because of the pandemic relate to affordability and separately to equity.
So I would say that the idea that we're going to get more equity or a flatter society out of this is maybe at best a really long-term project, and that has a lot to do with kind of policy more so than just kind of response to a pandemic. But I think what you're seeing is going to be a lot of pain on the lower end really soon. You're already starting to see kind of as the eviction moratoriums start to end, a lot of people are really going to struggle here, and it's really easy for white collar folks who can work from home and who, if you look at again, if you look at how the stock market's doing, people who work for those companies are fine, right? But, if you're working at a restaurant, if you work at a hotel, if you work at a lot of places that are really struggling right now, it's going to be a tough time. And that's going to take a little while to cycle through. So I'm very, very concerned about that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Faraji, on that. A couple of thoughts, though. I think there's a geographic dimension, again, to the extent that we do see the highest paying jobs and the highest paid people start to leave tight, small geographic areas and start spending money elsewhere. That potentially has the ability to sort of create more equity in terms of sort of city, suburbs, city, rural America in particular, right? And so, I'm from Akron, Ohio. There are no jobs there. It's been a dying area since like all the tires stopped being manufactured in Akron, Ohio many, many years ago, right? And so those type of areas could potentially benefit from more people moving to the areas. Now, I think from sort of, a lot of what we're super focused on right now is racial inequality in housing. And I think unless we're very intentional, and to your point, Faraji, really thoughtful about it, this could actually end up in a much worse position where you have the haves sort of dictating what new areas get sort of populated and the have-nots being sort of relegated to the other areas. You know, if cities really do empty out, who's going to be left in the cities and the households where there's no more jobs and no more spending? And so I would say that it's, if there is as big of a change, again, and that's a big if, right? If nothing changes, then nothing's going to change. But if there is a big shift as a result of COVID, I think it does create a real opportunity to think about, and I think Jeff here has a question on sort of, should we be thinking about zoning policy or other things? And I think unless we do that, the outcome is not going to be beneficial. But if we're thoughtful, we have an opportunity to make it actually really beneficial.
So why don't I read Jeff's question? He says, so far, you folks have speculated about what the new normal of supply and demand for housing and office space might be. But can you say something about regulations and the public policy side? Is there any new type of zoning or land use policy that might react to the new situation? As I read that, my 2 cents is it's too soon to even understand what's happening, let alone how to respond to it with land use. But we might not have the luxury of waiting 2 years for the data to pan out to think about how we address things. What are your thoughts?
I'll weigh in on that. I don't see any change at all in California. If anything, the vested interests are taking advantage of COVID to improve their position and their power. I think that the desire, I mean, what we need to improve housing equity is allow more housing, pure and simple. Allow a lot more and allow the market forces to produce an overabundance of housing. And that is never going to happen in California anytime soon for a variety of reasons. And I don't think COVID's going to change that at all. And just to give you an example, I've been trying to propose homeless housing, prefab version of homeless housing here in San Francisco. And I've been fighting for the last 5 years against the organized labor that do not want to see any prefab homes built ever in San Francisco, even in the midst of a homeless crisis that has been exacerbated by COVID by a factor of 5x. And the same forces that I've been battling for 5 years are still battling now. Now, maybe that will change in another year or two, but I haven't seen no diminution in the usual vested interest fighting innovation, fighting reform, fighting anything that will unleash more market forces.
That's been my impression as well.
I will, if I could, I think that's actually, I totally agree with you, Patrick, and there's not something dissimilar in DC. You know, we're going through a comprehensive plan overhaul, but it's, you know, kind of marginal at best. But I think there's a huge opportunity for smaller cities and, you know, kind of suburbs and places that actually are competing for workers, you know, who may have a little bit more leeway and fewer vested interests to really be aggressive here about, you know, both marketing themselves and about, you know, kind of land use policy in ways that really kind of encourage people to give places a try that they normally wouldn't.
Yeah, I agree. If, you know, if cities within 10 miles or 15 or 20 miles of San Francisco open things up and allowed as of right development in their downtowns and let the market rip, I think they could that could displace or attract a lot of people out of San Francisco or to them initially, because they could be essentially San Francisco light residents with much better quality of life.
I think that might. Sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
Just a brief comment. I mean, the realities of changing zoning and regulations, you know, are a given, right? And so that's going to be really hard to change. I guess, you know, I would hope that somebody smarter than me would be thinking about, hypothetically, if we do see an emptying out of the cities and a need over time to space out more to avoid things like COVID. Again, that's a hypothetical, right? We're really going to have to think about challenges like land deserts or food deserts. I mean, just sort of, you know, places where there's no grocery stores in suburb areas. Like, what's going to happen to the cities, and what you know, what can be done to ensure that it doesn't go down in quality, or we don't leave people behind in places that are more dangerous, or that it's you know, inequitable. So I do think there is it's a solid question. And again, somebody should be thinking about, if we do find ourselves, say, a year from now where this trend has been even accelerated, what are some of the dangers that we're going to run into as a society? Think about schooling, think about all the things, access to broadband. I mean, there are some really, really critical things that could go wrong that, cities have solved a lot of problems over time. They as you increase population in a city, the infrastructure scales sublinearly, right? So you need fewer hospitals as you grow in the population, but you spread people out and that changes again. And so how we respond to that and ensure that nobody is left in a very bad place I think it's an interesting thought experiment, but I can't agree more, having spent so many years of my life thinking about how zoning might be better in certain places and seeing very little change there. It's a very difficult thing to change, but.
So in these days, I'm looking for silver linings in everything, just because we don't have enough of them. And one possible silver lining here in the context of infrastructure is, in a world where people are working from home more often, even if not entirely, we have less usage of our roads. Vehicle mile traveled per capita will be reduced, presumably. And that might give us a new lease on life in terms of our road infrastructure. Will our existing mileage of roads be able to handle a greater amount of people as a result of people needing to travel less? And does that in some way help us spread out or make the damage of spreading out not quite as bad? One of the arguments against sprawl has always been the carbon emissions one. And that might, to some extent, be mitigated if people are living farther out and not driving as much. Is there a reason to be hopeful, or is this my imagination?
I think that's quite a stretch, Issy, but I'm glad to see that you're trying to find something. I'm skeptical about the whole idea about the emptying of the cities, because we're seeing very dense cities like Singapore, Hong Kong, Seoul, all deal quite competently with COVID, with much lower infection rates and death rates. They just happen to have a more conscientious population about wearing masks and things like that. And so I think cities will adjust, but I also think that the suburbs will be big beneficiaries of that. And I noticed a couple of the people asking questions wondered about whether we'll see more women go back to traditional roles, which to some degree is already happening, because I'm aware of quite a few women that have part-time jobs that they all do online, auditing books, doing all kinds of tasks that can be done remotely, and that's entirely their choice. And in fact, our contractor, I'm building a project right now, and his wife does insurance auditing all from home, which she works around her two twins' schedule. And that's something that will be accelerated by COVID rather than created by COVID. And I think that's where we'll see more in the suburbs.
We've got about a minute and a half left, so I'm just going to give each of you an opportunity to add one last item that came up and you haven't spoken of.
So silver linings, I would say, in the short term, I actually do think cities potentially could get cheaper. And I think that can be a great thing, even if we just have a temporary calming, in real estate prices in DC and New York and San Francisco and LA. That just takes a lot of burden off people who are really struggling right now. So, I'm kind of okay with that. If everybody discovers Alexandria and Arlington and wants to live in Tysons or Alpharetta or far off Queens, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I to add to the silver lining comment there, Faraji, one thing I think a lot about is people are spending a lot more time at home and getting to know their neighbors and their family in a way they haven't in the past, and spending less time in a stressful commute in a society and a community that is not really their so there's we always have these two personalities, like the area we work in and the area that we live in, and those coming together, I think could have actually a lot of positive communal benefits for, and and lowering of stress levels for a lot of people that, you know, are spending so much time traveling, going back and forth and adjusting from one place to the other. One last thought that I hadn't shared earlier, but I keep pointing to demographics as I talk about some of these trends, because COVID is a moment, but a moment in a really pretty interesting time demographically for the country. And so I keep thinking about, what are millennials going to want? What are Gen Z folks going to want when they think about housing? And, you know, I look at games like Fortnite, who has 350 million registered players, right? I mean, let's call it, even if that's overestimated, 250, like there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time virtually looking at screens. And so, you know, that generation who's built communities online more so than any other generation. One stat that just absolutely floored me is that the average amount of screen time for teenagers right now is 7 hours and 22 minutes a day, not including screen time for work, for school. I mean, I just don't even know where they find the hours in the day to do that. But, you know, teens today are a different generation, I mean, they grew up with iPhones in their hands. And so, so in any case, I think it's worth noting that COVID is going to intersect with a pretty important demographic shift that we're seeing as a country. And that's, yeah, anyway, thought-provoking at a minimum.
Patrick, any last words?
I think one silver lining of the COVID pandemic is it has caused a lot of people to rediscover the joys of walking. My neighbors all now take 1 hour walks around the neighborhood, and I think that's an altogether wonderful development.
I have to say one last thing, and that's that the pace of change is probably the single most salient feature of everything happening around us right now. We're living through a period of very compressed change, and these are interesting times. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everybody. This was a fantastic conversation, timely, rich, lots of great topics. There were a bunch of other questions that came in that we didn't have the time to get to, so we apologize for that. Issy Romam, thank you for hosting. Faraji, good to see you. My classmate Faraji, Jonathan, an alum of the center as well. Nice to see you. And excuse me, Jonathan, we're going to get you. Patrick is an alum, but Jonathan, we're going to get you up to the center as well again. So we're always glad to have you here. And I might add that, Jonathan, I appreciate you mentioning Fortnite. We're doing a couple of sessions tomorrow on the real estate in the virtual world, which is a whole realm that is kind of mind-blowing. So just as a reminder about the program tomorrow, that real estate being bought and sold in the virtual world. So anyway, thank you, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon on campus when we all get back to traveling again.